Captain Alan Rodriguez stood at the viewport of the UES Valiant, his eyes fixed on the massive fleet assembling before him. 3 months had passed since the Zelleran Alliance's desperate plea reached Earth. 3 months since humanity learned they were not alone in the universe. 3 months of preparation for a war unlike anything Earth had ever seen. "Captain, Admiral Grant is requesting your presence in the war room," said Lieutenant Susan Hayes, her voice pulling Rodriguez from his thoughts. "Tell her I'm on my way," he replied, taking one last look at the combined human Zelleran fleet. Hundreds of ships, some sleek with the curved designs preferred by the Zellerans, others bearing the more angular utilitarian appearance of human engineering. The corridors of the Valiant buzzed with activity as Rodriguez made his way to the war room. Crew members saluted as he passed, their faces a mixture of determination and barely concealed anxiety. None of them had signed up to fight an interstellar war, but here they were, about to engage an enemy that had terrorized this sector of the galaxy for decades. The war room fell silent as Rodriguez entered. Admiral Olivia Grant stood at the center, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun, her expression grim as she studied the holographic display showing the Draconid fleet movements. "Captain Rodriguez, good of you to join us," said Grant, nodding toward an empty seat at the table. "I was just briefing Commander Zirvax on our battle strategy." Rodriguez nodded at the Zelleran commander. Zirvax was tall and slender, with iridescent scales covering his face and hands and eyes that seemed to shift color with his mood. Right now they burned a deep amber, a sign of distress or concern, Rodriguez had learned. "You propose to attack their supply lines first," said Zirvax, his voice carrying the distinctive melodic quality of his species. "This is not the Zelleran way. We have always focused on defending our worlds." "And how has that worked for you so far?" Rodriguez asked bluntly. "The Draconids have taken 7 of your colony worlds in the past year alone." Zirvax's scales rippled, a sign of agitation. "We do not wish to become the monsters we fight against." Admiral Grant stepped forward. "Commander, I understand your concerns, but you came to us for help. This is how humans fight wars, not just to defend, but to eliminate the threat completely." Rodriguez's mind drifted back to the emergency meeting of the United Earth Council 3 months ago. He remembered the stunned silence as they viewed the evidence Dr. Kevin Phillips had decoded from the Zelleran distress signal. Footage of Draconid war crimes, entire Zelleran cities reduced to ash, civilians harvested for cruel experiments. The vote to intervene had been unanimous. "Perhaps it would help the commander to understand what led us here," Rodriguez suggested. "Dr. Phillips should be arriving shortly with Ambassador Miller." As if on cue, the door slid open, revealing Dr. Kevin Phillips and Ambassador Samantha Miller. Phillips was a slight man with disheveled brown hair and glasses that seemed perpetually perched at the end of his nose. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, he had been the first to decode the complex Zelleran language patterns in their distress call. "Sorry we're late," Miller said, straightening her formal diplomatic attire. "We were finalizing details with the Zelleran High Council." Rodriguez had always admired Miller's ability to bridge gaps between cultures. In just 3 months, she had managed to establish diplomatic relations with a completely alien civilization and convince their leadership to accept Earth's military doctrine. "I've been showing Commander Zirvax our battle plans," Grant explained. "He has reservations about our approach." Phillips set up his tablet and projected a series of images onto the main screen. "Commander, perhaps this will help explain our position. These are historical images from Earth's major conflicts." The room darkened as images flickered across the screen. The scorched Earth of World War II, the nuclear devastation of the resource wars, the orbital bombardments of the Mars Rebellion. "Humanity learned the hard way that half measures in warfare only prolong suffering," Phillips explained gently. "When we fight, we commit totally to victory." "Your species frightens me, Dr. Phillips," Zirvax admitted. "In all our history, the Zelleran Alliance has never employed such thoroughness in warfare. And that's why the Draconids have pushed you to the brink of extinction," Rodriguez said, his voice softer now. "They don't respect your restraint, they see it as weakness." Ambassador Miller stepped forward. Commander, we're not asking your people to change their values. That's why we're here, to do what you cannot or will not do yourselves. Zirvax's scales shifted to a deep blue, a color Rodriguez had not seen before. The color of resignation. Phillips whispered to Rodriguez. He's accepting our way. The Zelleran commander looked around the room, at the human officers waiting for his response. My people were once a proud race that spanned dozens of star systems. Now we cling to our last few worlds, always running, always hiding. When we received your response to our distress call, many on our High Council feared we had made a terrible mistake, that we had invited an even greater predator into our midst. He paused, his multifaceted eyes fixing on Rodriguez. Perhaps they were right, but we have no choice now. The Draconids leave us no room for survival. If becoming more like you is the price of our continued existence, so be it. Admiral Grant nodded solemnly. Our first strike teams are ready. Ghost Squadron will deploy in 6 hours to infiltrate the Draconid outpost in the Cygnus sector. We need to gather intelligence on their fleet movements before committing our main forces. Ghost Squadron? Zirvax asked. Our elite special operations team, Rodriguez explained, led by Major Natalie Cooper, the best we have. Miller brought up a new display showing the Draconid homeworld. Our ultimate objective. The Draconids have never faced a serious threat to their core systems. Their empire expanded outward for so long that their home defenses are actually their weakest point. You plan to strike their homeworld? Zirvax's scales paled to an almost transparent white. This is unthinkable. This is how we end wars, Grant replied simply. Cut off the head, and the body dies. Rodriguez watched as the Zelleran commander struggled with this concept. He understood the aliens' hesitation. The Zellerans were an ancient species with rigid codes of warfare, developed over thousands of years of limited conflicts. Humanity, by contrast, had refined the art of total war. Through centuries of brutal self-destruction, Major Cooper's team leaves at 0600, Grant continued. Captain Rodriguez, your ship will provide cover for their insertion. Commander Zirvax, we request that you assign a Zelleran guide to accompany them, someone familiar with Draconid security. Protocols. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing logistics, contingencies, and backup plans. As they finally adjourned, Rodriguez found himself walking alongside the Zelleran commander in the corridor. Your people move very quickly, Captain, Zirvax observed. Rodriguez nodded. We don't have the luxury of time, neither do your people. I still do not understand how a species can become so efficient at warfare and yet not destroy itself. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Who says we haven't tried? But we learned something important along the way. The same determination that makes us terrible enemies also makes us loyal friends. He paused at the junction leading to the hangar bay. The Draconids threatened your people. Now they'll learn what it means to have humanity as an enemy. Zirvax's scales shifted again, this time to a deep purple. For the sake of my people, I hope your way is the right one, Captain Rodriguez. It's the only way we know, Rodriguez replied, as they watched the first wave of Ghost Squadron ships being prepared for the mission that would begin humanity's first interstellar war. The massive shipyard orbiting Earth's moon had never been so busy. What once produced civilian vessels now churned out warships at an unprecedented rate. Lieutenant Commander Eric Martinez wiped sweat from his brow as he supervised the installation of human weapon systems onto a Zelleran scout ship. Careful with those power couplings, he called out to his team. Zelleran systems run on different energy principles than ours. A Zelleran engineer named Kirvos approached Martinez, his scales shifting to a curious green color. Your weapons are primitive by our standards, yet far more destructive. How is this possible? Martinez smiled grimly. Your people developed elegant technology. We developed efficient ways to kill. He patted the railgun being mounted on the Zelleran ship. This can fire a 20-pound tungsten slug at 8% the speed of light. No shields in the Draconid fleet can withstand a direct hit. Kirvos's scales paled. My people have had the ability to create such weapons for centuries. We chose not to. That was your choice, Martinez replied. Now you're facing extinction because of it. Across the solar system, humanity's industrial might had been redirected toward war. Factories that once produced household goods now manufactured ammunition. Research labs that developed medical treatments now worked on countermeasures to draconid bioweapons. Earth had not seen such mobilization since the resource wars a century ago. Meanwhile, aboard a stealth transport approaching the draconid outpost in the Cygnus sector, Major Natalie Cooper briefed her Ghost Squadron team. 6 humans and 1 Zalaran, huddled in the ship's cramped briefing room. Our mission is simple, Cooper explained, her voice steady despite the danger they faced. We infiltrate the outpost, gather intelligence on draconid fleet movements, and get out without being detected. She displayed a holographic map of the outpost. Zelnar will guide us through their security protocols. Sergeant John Pierce will handle demolitions if needed. Lieutenant Linda Garcia is our tech specialist. She'll extract their data cores. The Zalaran guide, Zelnar, spoke up. Major Cooper, I must warn you again. The draconids do not take prisoners. If we are captured, we won't be, Cooper stated with a confidence that came from years of dangerous missions. And if we are, we have protocols for that too. She didn't elaborate, but every human on the team understood the suicide pills embedded in their molars. The transport approached the small moon where the draconid outpost was located. Using advanced stealth technology developed specifically for this mission, they slipped past the outer sensor grid. As the ship touched down in a crater 3 miles from the facility, Cooper felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. Suits on. Weapons. Check, she ordered. We move in 5 minutes. The team donned their exo-atmospheric combat suits, black armor designed to be invisible to most sensor systems. Cooper watched as Garcia helped Zelnar adjust his human-made suit. Remember, Cooper told her team as they prepared to exit the ship, we're making history today. First human boots on enemy soil in an interstellar war. They moved across the moon's surface in practiced formation, using the low gravity to make rapid progress while staying hidden among the crater-pocked landscape. When they reached the outpost perimeter, Zelnar interfaced with the security system using codes provided by Zalaran intelligence. We have 18 minutes before the system cycles, the Zalaran whispered. Cooper nodded and led her team through the airlock. The interior of the draconid facility was hot and humid, matching the reptilian species' preferred environment. Red lighting cast an eerie glow throughout the corridors. Stay close, Cooper ordered as they made their way toward the central data hub. They encountered their first draconid guard at a junction. The massive reptilian creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, its scaled skin a dark green with red markings that signified its rank. Before it could sound an alarm, Pierce moved with shocking speed, driving a vibroblade through the base of the draconid's skull. Damn, Pierce whispered, lowering the heavy body silently to the floor. They're bigger than the briefing suggested. Cooper kept them moving. 2 more guards fell to silent weapons before they reached the data center. Garcia immediately went to work on the alien computers while the rest of the team secured the room. Major, Zelnar called out suddenly, his voice tight with distress. You should see this. Cooper joined the Zalaran at a large view screen showing the interior of another section of the base. What she saw made even her hardened stomach turn. Dozens of Zalaran civilians were suspended in fluid-filled tanks, tubes, and wires connected to their bodies. They're harvesting biological material, Garcia said, looking up from her data extraction. According to these files, they're using Zalaran genetic material to create some kind of biological weapon. Cooper swallowed her disgust and focused on the mission. Can you download everything? Already on it, Garcia replied. But there's something else. Detailed plans of draconid fleet movements. They're planning a major assault on the remaining Zalaran worlds in 2 weeks. Download it all, Cooper ordered. We just found our first major target. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. We've been detected, Pierce called out from his position at the door. Finish the download, Cooper ordered Garcia. Then, turned to the rest of her team. Prepare for extraction, weapons free. Zelnar, is there another way out of here? The Zealeran consulted a terminal. Maintenance shaft, 2 levels down. It leads to an auxiliary landing pad. Pierce, set charges in this room. We're leaving nothing for them to salvage. As Garcia completed the download, the team moved out, now facing active resistance. The first group of Draconid soldiers they encountered fell quickly to precise human gunfire, but more were coming. They're boxing us in, Pierce called out as they reached a junction where 3 corridors met. Cooper made a quick decision. Zelnar, take Garcia and the data, get to the extraction point. The rest of us will create a diversion. The Zelaran looked conflicted. This was not part of the plan. Plans change in combat, Cooper replied simply. The data is what matters. Go. As Zelnar and Garcia headed for the maintenance shaft, Cooper led the remaining team members in the opposite direction, drawing the Draconid forces away. They fought, with a ferocity that shocked even the battle-hardened Draconids, who had never encountered human warfare before. In the ensuing firefight, 2 Ghost Squadron members fell, but they took dozens of Draconids with them. Cooper, Pierce, and Specialist Frank Wong eventually fought their way to an external airlock. Time to disappear, Cooper said, activating a series of charges they had placed during their entry. The explosions rocked the facility, creating the distraction they needed to make their escape across the lunar surface. When they finally reached the extraction ship, they found Zelnar and Garcia already aboard. The data? Cooper asked immediately. Garcia held up a small device. Everything. Fleet movements, weapons research, and their biological experiments. As the stealth transport broke orbit, evading Draconid patrols scrambled in response to the attack, Cooper observed Zelnar. The Zelaran sat silently, his scales a deep blue. We lost good people today, Cooper said to him. Was it worth it? Zelnar looked up, his alien eyes meeting hers. My people have never witnessed such sacrifice for a mission. You barely knew my species 3 months ago, yet your soldiers died to protect our information. That's how we fight, Cooper replied simply. And this is just the beginning. As their ship accelerated toward the rendezvous point with the UES Valiant, Cooper knew the intelligence they had gathered would set in motion the full might of humanity's war machine. The Draconids had no idea what was coming for them. Commander Daniel White felt his heart race as he led Apollo Squadron toward the Draconid patrol fleet. 12 human fighters against 20 Draconid warships. The odds would have seemed impossible just a few weeks ago, but that was before they understood their enemy. Apollo Squadron, weapons hot, White commanded through his comm system. Remember the simulations. These lizards rely on size and power, not speed or tactics. The Draconid ships were massive by human standards, heavily armored and bristling with weapons, but they were also slow to maneuver and had predictable attack patterns. Copy that, Commander, replied Lieutenant Sofia Diaz, his wingman. We're with you. The human fighters were small, agile, and packed with more firepower than their size suggested. White had helped design these craft specifically to counter Draconid technology, based on the intelligence Ghost Squadron had gathered. As Apollo Squadron approached firing range, the Draconid fleet began to respond, turning their massive guns toward the human fighters. Evasive pattern Delta, White ordered. His pilots broke formation instantly, scattering in 12 different directions, making it impossible for the Draconid targeting systems to lock onto them. White pushed his fighter into a tight spiral, diving beneath the largest Draconid cruiser. The enemy ship's weapons could not depress enough to track him as he skimmed along its underside, releasing a series of small but powerful explosives at strategic points. Hit and run, people, he reminded his squadron. Don't give them a chance to predict your movements. Across the battlefield, the human fighters danced around the lumbering Draconid vessels like angry wasps around bears. The Draconids, used to enemies that either fled or engaged in predictable patterns, struggled to counter these new tactics. On the bridge of the lead Draconid warship, Supreme Commander Gorthak watched with growing rage as the human fighters evaded his gunners. These primitives should not be able to challenge us, he hissed to his second-in-command. Their technology is inferior. Yes, Supreme Commander, but their tactics are unconventional, replied his subordinate. They are vermin, Gorthak snarled, and we will crush them like all the others who have opposed the Imperium. He ordered his fleet into a defensive formation, creating overlapping fields of fire. It was a strategy that had worked against the Zellerans for decades. But the humans didn't behave like Zellerans. Instead of retreating when faced with the wall of firepower, White led his squadron straight into it, timing their approach to slip through gaps in the defensive screen that existed for mere seconds. Now, White ordered as they penetrated the Draconid formation. Target their propulsion systems and weapons nodes. Each human fighter released a swarm of guided missiles, each one programmed to seek specific vulnerabilities in Draconid ship design. The missiles found their targets with unerring accuracy, having been programmed based on the scans Ghost Squadron had stolen. 3 Draconid vessels erupted in flames almost simultaneously. The remaining ships tried to reposition, but they were too slow, too predictable. Apollo 3 and 7 take out their command ship's communication array, White ordered. Let's blind them. Aboard the UES Valiant, Captain Rodriguez and Admiral Grant watched the battle unfold through the tactical display. Commander White is performing admirably, Grant observed. Rodriguez nodded. This is just the beginning. White's squadron is testing their defenses, learning their real-time response patterns. Commander Zirvac stood nearby, his scales shifting colors rapidly as he watched the human fighters take on a fleet that would have devastated a Zelleran battle group of 3 times their size. Your pilots fight like they have no fear of death, the Zellaran remarked. They're not fearless, Rodriguez replied. They're just very, very good at what they do. Back in the battle, White's squadron had destroyed or disabled 7 Draconid ships while losing only 2 of their own. The Draconid fleet was in disarray, their formation broken, their coordinated fire disrupted. Apollo Squadron, form up for final attack run, White ordered. Target their flagship. As the human fighters regrouped and accelerated toward the Draconid command ship, Gorthak finally recognized the true threat these humans posed. Prepare the planet killer, he commanded. Target their colony in the Proxima system. His weapons officer hesitated. Supreme Commander, that weapon is meant for planetary targets, not fighters. I know that, fool, Gorthak snarled. These humans must learn the price of defiance. If we cannot defeat their fighters here, we will destroy their colony. They will learn fear as the Zellarans did. The massive weapon began to charge, drawing power from the flagship's core. It was the most feared weapon in the Draconid arsenal, capable of cracking a planet's crust and rendering it uninhabitable. White noticed the energy spike on his sensors. Command, the Draconid flagship is powering up something big. Energy readings, off the charts. On the Valiant, Rodriguez turned to his tactical officer. Alert Proxima Colony immediately. Initiate Project Aegis. Grant looked at him sharply. Are you certain? Dr. Johnson's system has never been tested in real combat. We don't have a choice, Rodriguez replied. We knew this moment would come. In orbit around the human colony on Proxima Centauri B, a network of satellites activated. Designed by Dr. Lisa Johnson, Project Aegis was humanity's answer to the Draconid planet killer. The Draconid weapon fired, sending a massive energy beam toward the Proxima system. It would take hours to reach its target at light speed, but when it did, the Draconids expected it to destroy the human colony completely. White's squadron completed their attack run on the Draconid flagship, causing significant damage, but failing to destroy it. As the last of his fighters disengaged, White received new orders from the Valiant. Apollo Squadron returned to base. Phase 1 complete. White looked back at the damaged Draconid fleet. We could finish them, Command. Negative, Commander, came Rodriguez's voice. We want some of them to survive. They need to report what happened here. Hours later, as the Draconid planet killer beam approached Proxima, Dr. Johnson stood in the colony's defense center, watching her creation prepare for its first real test. Aegis network at full power, reported a technician. All nodes synchronized. As the destructive energy reached the Proxima system, the Aegis satellites activated simultaneously, creating an overlapping energy field around the colony. When the Draconid weapon struck this field, something remarkable happened. Instead of destroying the colony, the energy was captured, redirected, and channeled back into the Aegis network. The satellites glowed brightly as they absorbed the massive power, then stabilized. "My God, it worked," Johnson whispered, watching the readings. "We captured their weapon's energy." Back on the Valiant, Rodriguez received the report from Proxima Colony with a grim smile. "Inform Admiral Grant," he told his communications officer. "Project Aegis was successful. The colony is safe." Zirvax, who had been watching the whole sequence of events, turned to Rodriguez. "You knew they would use their planet killer." "We counted on it," Rodriguez confirmed. "Now we've not only shown them that their ultimate weapon is useless against us, we've learned exactly how it works." He paused. "And next time, we'll be able to use that energy against them." On the damaged Draconid flagship, Gorthak received the impossible news. The human colony still existed. Their planet killer, never before defeated, had failed. "Supreme Commander," his sensor officer reported, voice trembling. "The humans are launching more ships. Many more ships." Gorthak stared at the tactical display as hundreds of human vessels appeared, moving in perfect formation toward Draconid territory. For the first time in his long life, the Supreme Commander felt fear. 6 weeks into the war, the galaxy witnessed something unprecedented. The Draconid Imperium was retreating on all fronts. Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant as it led a fleet of 70 human and Zelaran ships through the wreckage of what had once been a major Draconid stronghold. "Sir, we've secured the system," reported his tactical officer. "All Draconid forces have either been destroyed or have fled." Rodriguez nodded. "Signal the colony ships. They can begin landing operations." He looked at the nearby habitable world that until yesterday had been under Draconid control. Today it would become a forward base for the combined human-Zelaran forces. Admiral Grant's face appeared on the main view screen. "Captain, excellent work. That's the 3rd Draconid fortress world you've taken this month." "Thank you, Admiral. The Draconids are learning that size and strength aren't everything." Grant's expression turned serious. "We've received a communication from the Draconid High Command. They're requesting a diplomatic meeting." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "They want to talk? That's new?" "Indeed. They've never negotiated with any species before. The Zelaran Council sees this as a positive development." "And what does Earth Command think?" Rodriguez asked. "We think it's a delaying tactic," Grant replied, bluntly. "Intelligence suggests they're rushing to complete a new weapon system, but the Zelarans are insistent that we at least hear them out." Rodriguez nodded. "When and where?" "Neutral space. The mining colony at Ceti Alpha. 3 days from now." After the communication ended, Rodriguez turned to find Commander Zirvax watching him. The Zelaran had become a permanent liaison aboard the Valiant, and over the weeks of combat, Rodriguez had come to respect his perspective. "Your people believe the Draconids genuinely want peace?" Rodriguez asked. Zirvax's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. "My people want to believe it. The Zelaran way has always been to seek diplomatic solutions, even when evidence suggests they won't work." He paused. "But I have fought alongside humans now. I have seen your way. Sometimes I wonder which approach is truly more merciful." Rodriguez considered this. A swift, decisive war often causes less suffering than a prolonged conflict. "Yet your forces show no restraint," Zirvax observed. "You destroy military and industrial targets alike. You leave no Draconid world untouched." "That's how total war works," Rodriguez replied. "We don't just defeat armies. We eliminate the enemy's ability to make war." 3 days later, the diplomatic meeting took place on Ceti Alpha. Ambassador Samantha Miller led the human delegation, accompanied by Admiral Grant and Captain Rodriguez. The Zelaran High Council sent their most senior diplomat, along with Commander Zirvax. The Draconid representatives arrived in a massive warship, clearly designed to intimidate. Supreme Commander Gorthak himself led their delegation, his massive, scaled form towering over the humans as they gathered in the colony's meeting chamber. "We acknowledge the unexpected effectiveness of your species in warfare," Gorthak began, his voice a deep rumble. "The Draconid Imperium is willing to discuss terms for cessation of hostilities." Ambassador Miller's face remained neutral, but Rodriguez could see the skepticism in her eyes. "We're listening." Gorthak's second-in-command unfolded a star map. "We propose a division of territory. The Zelleran worlds you have recaptured can remain under their control. Several buffer systems will be established between our territories." The senior Zelleran diplomat seemed relieved. "This is more generous than we expected. Perhaps we can—" "And what about the Zellaran worlds you still occupy?" Admiral Grant interrupted. "The ones where you're conducting biological experiments on civilians?" Gorthak's eyes narrowed. "Those worlds are integral to the Imperium. They are non-negotiable." Miller leaned forward. "Then we have nothing to discuss." The Draconid commander seemed genuinely surprised. "You would continue this war when we offer you peace?" "That's not peace," Rodriguez said. "That's a pause while you regroup." Admiral Grant stood. "The terms of Earth are simple: unconditional surrender and immediate withdrawal from all occupied territories. Nothing less." Gorthak's scales darkened with rage. "You primitives dare to dictate terms to the Draconid Imperium? We have ruled this sector for millennium. And now your rule is ending," Miller said calmly. "Those are our terms." The meeting ended abruptly, with the Draconids storming out. As they returned to the Valiant, the Zellaran diplomat seemed distressed. "You never intended to negotiate," he accused Grant. "You knew they wouldn't accept those terms." "Of course they wouldn't," Grant replied. "But now we've confirmed they have no genuine interest in peace. They just wanted time." Back on the bridge, Rodriguez received an urgent communication from Earth Command. "Captain, our long-range sensors have detected massive Draconid fleet movements. They're concentrating forces for a major assault." "Target?" Rodriguez asked. "Your location? They're coming for SETI Alpha." Rodriguez immediately began issuing orders. "Battle stations. Alert all ships in the fleet. Evacuate all non-essential personnel from the colony." Within hours, the largest Draconid fleet they had yet encountered appeared at the edge of the system. Over 200 warships against Rodriguez's 70. "They think numbers will save them," Rodriguez observed grimly. Zirvax looked troubled. "Even with superior tactics, these odds are challenging," Rodriguez finished for him. "But we've been preparing for this." He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships implement Operation Thunderbolt." On his command, 50 small unmanned vessels that had been hidden in the system's asteroid belt suddenly activated. These drones, each loaded with experimental weapons developed by Earth's scientists, accelerated toward the Draconid fleet. The Draconids, expecting a conventional battle, were caught completely off guard as the drones weaved through their formation, attaching to their largest ships before detonating. The explosions were not particularly large, but they emitted a specific frequency that disrupted Draconid shield technology. "Now," Rodriguez ordered, and his fleet surged forward, striking while the enemy's defenses were compromised. What followed was not a battle but a slaughter. The human ships, though outnumbered, tore through the Draconid fleet with surgical precision. Within 2 hours, over half the Draconid vessels were destroyed or disabled. Supreme Commander Gorthak, watching from his flagship, could not comprehend what was happening. How can they know exactly where to strike? How can they anticipate our every move? The answer was simple but terrible. Humans had been studying Draconid tactics and technology intensively. Every battle provided more data, which was immediately analyzed and used to improve human strategies. The Draconids, in contrast, had barely adapted their approach, still fighting as they had for centuries. As Gorthak ordered a retreat, saving barely a third of his once mighty fleet, he received a transmission from the human flagship. "Captain," Rodriguez's face appeared on his screen. "This is what happens when you choose to continue fighting," Rodriguez said simply. "There is nowhere in this galaxy you can hide from us now." When the transmission ended, Gorthok turned to his officers. Send word to the Imperial Palace. The humans must be stopped at any cost. Authorize use of the forbidden technologies. His second-in-command looked alarmed. But, Supreme Commander, the ancient protocols forbid. I know what they forbid. Gorthok snarled. But we face extinction. The protocols no longer matter. On the Valiant, Rodriguez watched the Draconid fleet retreat. Victory should have brought satisfaction, but he felt only grim resolve. This war was far from over, and something told him the worst was yet to come. Dr. Kevin Phillips stared at the data on his screen with growing horror. The information had come from a Draconid research facility captured just hours ago by Ghost Squadron. Admiral Grant, Captain Rodriguez, you need to see this immediately, he said, his voice tight with urgency. Grant and Rodriguez gathered around his workstation aboard the UES Valiant. Ambassador Miller and Commander Zirvax joined them moments later. What am I looking at, Doctor? Grant asked. The Draconids have developed a bioweapon, Phillips explained. They've been using Zelaran genetic material to create a virus that targets specific DNA markers. According to these files, they plan to release it across all inhabited systems in the sector. How bad? Rodriguez asked simply. Phillips looked grim. Total extinction of all Zelaran populations within days, and the virus is designed to mutate rapidly. It could eventually affect humans too. Zirvax's scales turned almost white with shock. This violates every law of warfare in known space. Even the Draconids have never attempted something so genocidal. Desperate enemies resort to desperate measures, Grant observed. They realize they can't win conventionally. Miller studied the facility's location on the star map. This research center is deep in Draconid territory, close to their homeworld. We've pushed them all the way back to their core systems. How soon until they can deploy this weapon? Rodriguez asked. According to these files, just 72 hours, Phillips replied. They're preparing to load it onto specialized ships, as we speak. Grant didn't hesitate. We need to destroy that facility immediately. Conventional strikes won't be enough, Phillips warned. The facility is too well protected and we can't risk any of the virus escaping. We need a team on the ground to ensure complete containment before destruction. All eyes turned to the comm screen as Major Natalie Cooper's face appeared. Ghost Squadron had been standing by, awaiting their next mission. Major, we need your team to infiltrate a Draconid research facility. Grant explained the situation. Quickly, Cooper nodded, her expression resolute. My team is ready, Admiral, but getting that deep into Draconid space won't be easy. You'll have help, Rodriguez said. Commander Zirvax has volunteered to accompany you, and will create a diversion they can't ignore. Within hours, the plan was set in motion. The main human fleet, led by the Valiant, launched an all-out assault on a major Draconid military base. Meanwhile, a small stealth ship carried Cooper's team and Zirvax toward the research facility. As they approached their target, Cooper briefed her team. This is straightforward. Get in, plant charges at these key points to ensure complete destruction, and get out. No survivors, no samples left intact. One of her soldiers, a young specialist named Ryan Kelly, looked troubled. Major, what if there are Draconid civilians in there? Scientists who might not support this weapon? Cooper's expression hardened. Anyone working on a genocide virus made their choice. We can't take chances. The stealth ship landed in a remote area near the facility. As Ghost Squadron moved through the dense jungle toward their target, they encountered something unexpected. A Draconid patrol moving away from the facility. Hold position, Cooper ordered, as her team concealed themselves. To their surprise, the Draconids appeared to be arguing among themselves. The translation software is picking up their conversation, whispered Lieutenant Garcia. Some of them are deserting. They're saying the bioweapon project violates their ancient codes. Cooper exchanged glances with Zirvax. Internal division? The Draconid civilization is ancient, Zirvax explained quietly. Their warrior codes prohibit certain weapons. It seems not all of them agree with their leadership's desperation. This new information complicated the mission, but Cooper stayed focused. Once the deserters passed, they continued toward the facility. While Cooper's team worked to infiltrate the research center, a massive battle raged elsewhere. The Valiant led the human fleet against the main Draconid defense force. The space around the Draconid military base blazed with weapons fire and exploding ships. On the bridge of the Valiant, Rodriguez watched the tactical display. "Status report? Draconid forces are fully engaged, Captain," his tactical officer replied. "They've committed their entire reserve fleet to defend the base. Ghost Squadron should have clear access to their target." At the research facility, Cooper's team moved efficiently through the complex, planting explosive charges at structural weak points and data centers. They encountered resistance but dealt with it quickly and quietly. In the central laboratory, they found something disturbing: rows of stasis chambers containing Zelleran subjects, still alive but being used to test the virus. "We need to put them out of their misery," Cooper said grimly, her hand tightening on her weapon. "Wait." Zirvac stepped forward, his scales shifting to a color Cooper had never seen before, a deep purple with golden flecks. "Some may be saved. The virus development is incomplete." A decision had to be made quickly. Every moment they remained increased their risk of discovery. 5 minutes, Cooper decided. We save who we can and destroy the rest. Working rapidly, they managed to disconnect 12 Zellerans from the testing apparatus. The others were too far gone, infected with test versions of the virus. Cooper personally ended their suffering with quick, merciful shots. As they prepared to leave with the survivors, an alarm blared throughout the facility. "We've been detected," Garcia warned. "Security doors are sealing." "Plan B," Cooper ordered. "We detonate now and fight our way out." They set the charges for immediate detonation and began their desperate escape, carrying the weakened Zellaran survivors. The explosions rocked the facility behind them, destroying the virus samples and research data. In orbit, Supreme Commander Gorthak received the news of the attack on the research facility with rage. The humans knew: redirect forces immediately, but it was too late. By the time Draconid reinforcements arrived, the facility was a smoking ruin, and Cooper's team was already rendezvousing with their extraction ship. As they lifted off from the planet's surface, Cooper looked at the rescued Zellarans. "Get a message to the Valiant. Mission accomplished, but the war isn't over. The Draconids will have backups of the research." "That's why we're not stopping," came Rodriguez's voice over the comm. "All forces are proceeding to the final objective, the Draconid homeworld." Days later, the combined human Zelleran fleet approached the Draconid home system. The Draconids had gathered their remaining forces for a last stand to protect their birthplace. On the Valiant, Rodriguez addressed the fleet commanders. "This ends today. The Draconids must understand that genocide is not an option, that some lines cannot be crossed." The final battle was brutal but decisive. Human forces, now familiar with every aspect of Draconid tactics and technology, systematically dismantled their defenses. When the Draconid Royal Palace was surrounded by Colonel Paul Martinez's Helldivers, Supreme Commander Gorthak finally surrendered. In the palace's Grand Hall, Admiral Grant, Ambassador Miller, and Captain Rodriguez accepted the formal surrender of the Draconid Imperium. The terms were harsh: complete disarmament, withdrawal from all conquered territories, and oversight of their civilization until they proved they could rejoin galactic society peacefully. As they left the palace, Rodriguez found Zirvax waiting. The Zellaran scales now displayed a complex pattern that Rodriguez couldn't interpret. "Your people have won a great victory," Zirvax said. "The galaxy will never be the same." "Neither will humanity," Rodriguez replied. "This war has changed us too. When we sent our plea into the stars, we never imagined the force we would unleash," Zirvax admitted. "Your people do not fight wars, you end them." Rodriguez looked out at the Draconid capital city, now occupied by human forces. "That's the paradox of humanity, Commander. We dream of peace but excel at war." A month later, Ambassador Miller addressed the newly formed Galactic Council. representing dozens of species including the now liberated Zellerans and the defeated Draconids. Humanity entered this conflict because we answered a call for help, she told the assembled representatives. We will always answer such calls, but let our response to the Draconids serve as both a promise and a warning. Those who seek peaceful coexistence will find no better friend than humanity. Those who threaten that peace should know, we do not fight to defend, we fight to end threats permanently. As her words echoed through the council chamber, many representatives shifted uncomfortably. They had watched humans defeat the undefeatable Draconid Imperium in less than a year. They had witnessed the efficiency and totality of human warfare. The key, Galaxy had found its protector, but also its most terrifying potential enemy. The age of humanity had begun.